Hello and welcome to this edition of Africa This Week, your wrap of what happened across the continent. I'm Mashudu Masuta. In this part of the show, we review Asian investment in Africa, as well as this week's World Telecommunication and Information Society Day. China and India's continued growth as economic powerhouses, coupled with their sustainable investments in Africa, make them important partners in the fight against poverty on the continent. This is the view of the International Finance Corporation, as explained by the IFC's Vice President for Asia Pacific, Karen Finkelstein. Karen is a champion of IFC's global management team for South-South investments.
A key part of sustainability for us is standards, and one exciting thing that's happening, I think, within China this week with regard to environmental and social standards is the China Banking Regulatory Commission is adopting what they call the green credit policies. And this is an exciting development because they're adopting standards which are, we've worked with them to put in place, and they're having a conference on Wednesday, which I'll open with the Chinese Banking Regulatory Commission's chairman, and several central bankers from around the world will be there, including from Africa. So I think what this will help is to really help banking regulators across the continent to adopt standards so they can assess the risks of investments in their home markets against a standard for environment and social sustainability that will make sense for their people.
Now, one of the things that has come out is that, you know, when you talk about this knowledge sharing, that it's also two ways. It's not just, for instance, countries like China and India, you know, imparting their knowledge to African countries, but there is something that, and some valuable things that Africa has learned and can pass on to some of these powerhouses as well.
That is exactly right, and I think one area that IFC has seen success in Africa is around gender-based financing, where we work with financial institutions to help target female-owned businesses and provide not just micro businesses, but small and medium and larger businesses. So we've brought an expert from Africa to our team in Indonesia who's helping us across Asia to put these gender-based finance lines in place in Asia. So that's very exciting.
We talk a lot about China, and I was saying to you earlier on, I've just come from a conference where a lot was said about how much China is putting onto the African continent, but India also investing substantial amounts into the continent.
Yes, India is following its own strengths in terms of services, in terms of IT, renewable energy. In addition, India has developed a lot of business models, what they call inclusive business models, which target the bottom of the pyramid, which have made a lot of sense in India and make sense for Africa. So we're trying to help bring those business models to the continent.
What I found quite interesting was, coming from your office, was that South-South projects perform as well or better than the rest of IFC. Why is that?
I think that's a really interesting fact as well. And what I think is happening and what the studies have shown is that, you know, if you develop your business in a developing country, you're usually faced with different regulatory and market challenges. So when you then expand your business to another developing market, when you meet those same challenges, you know how to adapt your business to the local environment much more quickly than if you come from a developed market where those challenges have already been solved for you.
That's actually quite interesting, because that was going to be my question. A country like China has gone into countries that other countries will not even consider in terms of risk, and yet China goes in there and is quite successful.
Exactly, because I think when you look, especially at the Chinese private sector, you know, in the year 2000, only 1% of financing from banks in China went to the private sector. So they really had to adapt to very tough market conditions. So when they come over to the continent and face challenges, I think they're better able to really move forward in challenging environments than other companies may be.
Thursday was World Telecommunications and Information Society Day. This day is used to raise awareness of possibilities the internet and other information technologies bring to societies. The question we asked was, is Africa using integrated media effectively in enterprise development? We spoke to Yaron Asabi, CEO for Digital Solutions Group, and Dirk Dijkstra, who is Head of Communications at Insight from our Cape Town studios.
Mobile has changed Africa. We've seen mobile learning, mobile health, and government applications appearing. The adoption of mobile has been phenomenal. Mobile internet has allowed us to leapfrog a few technologies, and we are now at a point where almost anybody can access the internet from their mobile phone, and internet adoption has unbelievable impact on GDP. More than 10% internet broadband penetration has a direct correlation to about 1%, according to the World Bank, of GDP increase. So I think there's an opportunity to create jobs and really grow the economy using mobile internet in Africa.
Dirk, I want to come to you in Cape Town. We are talking about telecommunications Telecommunications on this day. I want to ask you about the same thing that I've asked, and really why I'm drilling in on this question of whether we are using this effectively enough, particularly when it comes to doing business, and for the small business person, whether they're using this resource enough to be able to market themselves.
Well, I do think e-commerce has taken off in South Africa. It still lags behind quite a lot behind European, American markets. Mobile advertising at the moment is also picking up slowly in South African markets at the moment. I do think there's a big problem, of course, with connectivity and the bandwidth. Speed of bandwidth is unfortunately quite slow. It's very expensive, and we see all people and youngsters around us using their mobile phones. But I think more can be done, basically, e-commerce wise, and mobile phone adoption, basically.
Dirk, when you say more can be done, what is that more?
Well, I read an interesting article from Arthur Goldstruck last week, when he was referring to, I think, 8 sea cables have been lined to South Africa. I think one of them is actually entering Cape Town this month. There is actually enormous capacity when we're talking about bandwidth in South Africa, but unfortunately, only a very small percentage of that is actually being used at the moment, and I think that's all down to companies wanting to make money and basically not making that bandwidth available. It's still very expensive, very slow in South Africa. There is plenty of capacity apparently. For some odd reason, it's not being used at the moment.
I want to come here to Joburg. Yara, now when you hear something like that, on the back of that, it goes back to the question then, if there's so much capacity and there's so much opportunity, are we then capitalizing on it, or if we still have all these impediments and we're not able to go past them?
I think that the new cables that have been alluded to and that have been deployed recently certainly increase capacity. We did have shortage of capacity. I think it's always a supply and demand issue. So as people demand the internet, I think the mobile network operators and telco companies in Africa and Middle East will definitely invest more in infrastructure. And we're seeing amazing adoption with low-cost smartphones. Smartphones have now become very affordable. I'm holding one here that is under $100, which is 800 Rand. And it has internet access. You can have applications on the device, and it is making it affordable for anybody to really use and be able to adopt it. So I think that now that we're getting to the level where anybody can have access to the internet, we're going to see big adoption rates.
We continued our discussion on telecommunications, society and economies on this World Telecommunications and Information Society Day with those that have applied technology to create enterprise and adapt their business strategies. Entrepreneurs Helen Holyoke and Kellen van Aswegen.
My enterprise primarily in book publishing. Our focus is to actually get the books and authors into the media. So we set up and arrange television interviews, radio interviews, newspaper interviews, magazine interviews across all media. But in the last few years, the whole technology that's grown so significantly has enabled us to use online facilities to promote. And this all started, I suppose, primarily with Facebook. And in my world and in my networking circles, a lot of the writers, publishers, journalists all connect with each other.
Helen, I want to ask you this. As a publisher, are you threatened by what's happening in this space? Because some publishers are, because they're not making the transition.
Well, because of the transition to ebook publishing, there's obviously a move to a lot more independence amongst the writers. So we're seeing a lot more self-published works being produced, because writers actually make more money out of their books being sold through the ebook system. And yes, there is a threat to printed versions of books being published, but one should embrace it and actually see the possibilities of getting more sold in numbers in terms of e-publishing, as opposed to print publishing all by itself.
Now, one of the things that has come from this in terms of just opportunity of this space is Food Cops.
That's correct.
I would like you to tell us quickly.
Okay, Food Cops is an initiative that Callan and I started towards the end of last year, and it was a Facebook-driven business. So we launched it on Facebook, and there's a page on Facebook which is now linked to a Twitter account. So it started primarily just on Facebook, and it has now grown into a business that is sustainable with its own hourly, a weekly radio program, an hour show on a radio show, and there's also a slot on national radio, which we now go in and do restaurant reviews on a weekly basis.
So tell me, how would this work though? You know, if you, I would imagine that you're one of the food cops. How would it work?
Absolutely.
You know, a day in the life of
the
you.
food cops is everyone. It's the public, and we invite everyone to come onto the social. It's a social foodies guide to restaurants. That's what we phrase it as, and where everyone is a critic. So they can come on, post their own reviews of restaurants and make it interactive. And the great thing is that the food cops, you know, spark a conversation. We chat to everyone who posts a comment, and all the reviews are answered by us. So it's a fantastic platform that we've interlinked so many different platforms. And Facebook is not, Facebook's old in terms of technology and social media. It's out the window. What's happening now is the third-party applications, or the other applications that are linking to Facebook. Those are becoming the most important aspects to focus on.
So what this says to me though, and I've been seeing this happen not just in the space that you're in though, is that what used to be the expert now has become, you know, a person who loves food now becomes an expert. You don't have to have gone and studied to be a chef or have studied to be a journalist. Are you finding this though, that your consumers are coming on board because this is something that they love and this is something that's relevant to them?
Absolutely. The whole concept is driven around about the public giving their own views and opinions of it, and that's what we invite. So come onto our page, the Food Cops page. We also have a website that you can go check out, thefoodcops.co.za. And what's really interesting about the whole social networking space is that it's become everyone's playground. It's become a business playground, it's become a friend's playground, it's become a social environment. It's a way people are chatting and, you know, interacting.
After the break, more stories making headlines this week.